In the previous video, I went through G and H, and this one I'm going to do I and J. I and J are among, or at least I is probably one of the hardest ones we have that we could give you. So I would recommend practicing I would recommend practicing J and all the rest of them. But let me show you I using a conditional proof method. This is one of the ones where doing a reductio would actually get you in trouble, or at least it would take a lot longer. So let's do a conditional proof instead. This is going to be conditional proof. We're assuming P in order to get to Q or R. And there's a few things that we could do here. We could try to do a reductio with Q or R, but that would still end up taking rather longer. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to instead start a wedge elimination after we start our reductio. I've already started the reductio here, so now let's do the wedge elimination. So we're going to assume P arrow Q, assume it for the sake of a wedge elimination. Remember, you do not cite any lines for assumptions. If you do, you're going to get points off. Don't do it. Then from lines 2 and 3 via modus ponens, we get Q. And then our goal is Q wedge R. That's a wedge introduction. So wedge introduce it. Now the other side. Assume P arrow R. Get R. Then do Q wedge R. Assumption from lines 2 and lines 5. And nope, this is going to be 2 and 6. And PP 7 wedge introduction. Since we've gone there twice, we can assert, therefore, Q wedge R. That's going to be from lines 1, 3, 5, 6, and 8, wedge elimination. And then we get to write down P leads to Q wedge R. From lines 2 to lines 9, conditional proof. Now let's take a look at what our assumption number is going to be. We write an assumption number that matches the line number for every assumption that we were given or that we introduced. And then that 4 came from 2 and 3. 5 came from line 4, so that's going to get a 2 and a 3. 7 came from 2 and 6. 8 came from 7, which means it also gets a 2 and a 6. In line 9, since it's a wedge elimination line, we're going to cross out 2 numbers, but first we have to write down the assumptions. So a 1, a 2, a 3, and a 6. And then we discharge the 3 and we discharge the 6. For line 10, we write down a 1 and 2 first, and then we discharge the 2. This is the fastest way to do this side of the proof, so let's go ahead and do the other side of the proof. Let's say that we were given P arrow Q wedge R as an assumption, and our goal is to get to P wedge Q or P wedge R, or P arrow R. Since the wedge is the main operator in our conclusion, we're going to do a reductio. So let's do a reductio. It's not the case that P arrow Q or P arrow R. Then we De Morgan's it to get a nice arrow or nice and statement. Break it apart. Then let's go ahead and morph these into what we want. It's going to be our favorite 35G again. And now I want to pull off everything that I might need. Though I'm not going to pull off the P twice since I only need it once. So let's say that came from line 6 in elimination. Came from line 7, also and elimination. And now we can ask, all right, well, what are we going to do with this? Well, notice that we haven't used line 1 yet. So let's go ahead and hop up and use line 1, because that might actually be useful. From line 1, we can get Q wedge R via modus ponens with 1, 8, MPP. Now, let's take a quick look down here at 9, 10, and 11. This has the makings of a disjunctive syllogism and a way to get us a contradiction. Remember, if I said that I either had soup or I had salad, and then I tell you that I didn't have salad, that means that I must have had the soup. So if I know that I have Q or R, and I also know that I don't have Q, that means that I must have R. From lines 9, 11, disjunctive syllogism. But now I have R and I don't have R, which is a nice contradiction from lines 10, 12, and introduction. Since we've reached a contradiction starting with line 2, we're actually now going to be able to finally discharge our assumption. Since we assumed something that had a negation, we have to negate the entirety of our assumption. Two, 13, RAA. Then for line 15, we can drop off the double negations. Now for our line numbers, or the assumption numbers, we give an assumption number that matches the line number for every assumption given or introduced. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. So pretty much it's 2 all the way down until you hit line 11. Line 11 is where the 1 finally gets involved. And then on line 14, we're discharging the RAA. So we're going to cross out line 1 or line 2. And then 15 just refers to 14. And we just end with the assumption that we were given. This isn't to say that this is the only way to do this one, but it is for some folks that like reductios. It might be the clearest way to do it, to be honest. But it is still fairly long. You could have done this in a different way, plausibly, but as I said, that can take some time. Another way to do this one would be to end up using, let's say, 49.2. So let me actually demo that one because I do think that that one's important to know. So let's say that we wanted to do 49.2 instead. And I'll tell you why we know we want to do that in a second. Let's start with our assumptions. My goal again is P arrow Q or P arrow R. Now, one of the equivalency rules that we know is 49.1 and 49.2. That says that if I have a wedge statement like this, it's the same as saying that I have not P arrow Q arrow P arrow R. So one of the things that I could do actually is a conditional proof. Why would I do a conditional proof? Because I have guilty knowledge and I know how it's going to work out. And I think that this will take around, I think we can do this one in 13 lines. So it's not that much shorter. And if you don't like guilty knowledge stuff, don't do it this way. But let's say that we did it with this. So we would assume not P arrow Q. Assume for the sake of conditional proof, in order to reach P arrow R, then we would assume the P. Assume for the sake of conditional proof in order to reach R. And then we can start doing some stuff. So we have a Q wedge R here. That's nice. We have Q wedge R. Q wedge R comes from lines 1, 3, MPP. I want to get rid of that negation stuff in line 2, so I can turn this into a P and a not Q. Actually, we can make this shorter than I thought. So if we do P and not Q, that's from line 2, and this is just SI 35G. You really, 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 really want to know 35G. Then we break this apart into P and not Q. And then look, here our goal is to get to R, and we have an R right here. And we also have a negation Q. If we have Q wedge R, and we know that Q is not the case, then we do a disjunctive syllogism to get R. So from 4 and 7 with disjunctive syllogism, we get R. And R was our goal. So we can say that P leads to R from lines 3, 8, conditional proof. Now look, from line 2, our goal is to get to P arrow R. So we can also say that not P arrow Q leads to P arrow R from 2, 9, conditional proof. And due to our guilty knowledge, we know that we have a rule right over here that lets us go from that to P arrow Q or P arrow R. 10 SI 49.2. If you did it with a wedge elimination in line 4, you would have had 2 extra lines just in virtue of the way the wedge elimination works. But a disjunctive syllogism is quite literally faster and gets you just straight there. But you can see why you might want to do a wedge elimination. If you already have the R right there, well, your goal is R, so you would just have to figure out a way to get R from Q, and there would be a way to do that. But again, you don't really need to, could just do it that way. Let's take a look at our assumption numbers though. Assumption number to every assumption we have are introduced. And then we just start doing this type of thing. Line 9 is a conditional proof. So we write down 1, 2, and 3, and then we discharge the 3. Then 10, we cite 2 and 9, so 1 and 2, it's conditional proof line. Cross out the 2, and we're left with just 1. And that is exactly what we wanted. So this is one of the ways to do I, and I would recommend learning this way, to be honest. It's nice. It's easier in some ways than what I did earlier. This was 15 lines. This is 11. Let's quickly do J and see how that one goes.